more positive.
Yes, my approach is much more positive than that. Perhaps I'm alone with this view, but I will try to convince you to see GDPR as a slightly positive and forward-leaning approach to security from EU perspective.
Well, it is positive. It's just, some countries embraced Euro and some countries didn't do that. It's just public opinion. Okay, yeah. Stage is yours.
Okay, thank you very much.
There's a clicker, yeah.
And it works. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you for the opportunity for being here with you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy that I can be part of this great event this year again, and I will definitely approach GDPR from a slightly different perspective. I was participating at the event from the very morning, and I was very happy to actually hear very different views on how different organizations, commercial companies, technical experts, and service providers actually approach GDPR, and they start to explain what sort of technical difficulties we have, what sort of workflow difficulties we have, for example, when it comes to company marketing strategies. The previous speaker, the gentleman who was speaking before Ida, he was mentioning a lot of issues when it comes to, he also played out that Indian dance, when you actually halt at a certain moment and you can't move forward with your marketing technologies, because technically all approaches are programmed to collect data, personal data, and to synthesize it, so actually to process it, to reuse it, and to provide further value on the basis of the inputs and the data private individuals provide. So what shall we do with it? Basically, it's an open question, and this is the first day of GDPR, so it's really high time to think about it. My view is a little bit different. So let's start with a kind of helicopter view, and let's see what we will face in the upcoming future based on the data, what we have gathered, or what we gathered in the past couple of years. So basically, what we are talking about, and what is one of the basic motivations behind actually having GDPR, implying GDPR, or having something very severe on legislation level, has actually financial reasons behind related to cybercrime. A couple of data pieces, I'm sure most of these are already known for you. I'm just reshuffling your ideas and refreshing your memories from last year. So cybercrime cost estimates that we have risen from 400 billion US dollars to 6 trillion US dollars. And this number will be reached by 2011. So this is an enormous growth in the overall value of cybercrime. This is what we lose on cybercrime, basically, worldwide. By 2020, the world will need to cyber defend, a nice expression, 50 times more data than it does today. Today means actually last year. But still, it's also an enormous growth in the need of actually defending and securing our data. Next one. There is a company who does these trend-setting data collections, Cybersecurity Ventures, and they believe that it will be $1 trillion US spent globally on cybersecurity in the period of 2017 to 2021. So we will spend $1 trillion USD on tackling cybercrime. So this is what we have financially, okay? This is the setting. Let's move on. Another type of business value that we can actually approach is the impact. How will companies have to restructure their internal leadership and leadership structures to be able to face this kind of challenge, okay? CEOs will definitely lose their positions. 30% will lose their positions. Current CEOs will lose their positions if they are not able to tackle digitalization and if they are not able to tackle the challenges that come with the digital economy. So purely, and to translate it to human language, if they don't have digital skills, they will be replaced by other CEOs who have digital skills, or at least who understand cybersecurity experts and digital economy experts who work below them. In 2017, we could actually see a lot of growing attention to the CIO position. Obviously, with the coming of the GDPR, the Chief Information Officer and the role of the Chief Information Officer has grown a lot, not only within the EU community, but also elsewhere. My company has a lot of business operations, let's say, in the Far East. And personally, for me, it was quite interesting to understand that there are many countries in the Far East who don't have CIOs at all. Now they are learning the importance of it, and they are learning what DPO means because they have to, because GDPR enforces them to think about cybersecurity and data security issues if they want to do business in Europe, in the European ecosystem, and if they want to serve clients, or if they want to provide digital services for private individuals who are European citizens, then they have to comply with the GDPR. So they have to know how these roles work within a company, and obviously they have to comply with the necessities that a DPO or a CIO poses towards the company internally. Also, business heads, I have already mentioned this when we talked about the CIOs, and some traditional roles like Chief Data Officer, Chief Digital Officer, and Chief Customer Officer will continue to get reintegrated into traditional roles. That means something very similar to what I've just mentioned about the CIO thing, that only those leads will be able to keep their positions who understand the importance and the role and the functionalities of digitalization. Why is that so? There is a very simple question, because many people talk about the transformative role of GDPR to the European economy and to the world economy in general. But why is that so? I believe there is a very simple answer behind, and that is data, purely data. Many presenters have already mentioned today that data is considered, by now, data can be considered as a new resource. Some people even say that it works like, or it functions like a new natural resource. I wouldn't say it's natural, because data comes by production, by digitalized production, but still, we have to handle it as a resource. Why? Because there are so many data elements around that we buy and sell, produce, reproduce, analyze, synthesize, and produce further value upon the basis of original, let's say, raw data, that we have to handle it just like we handle, for example, oil and oil-related natural resources. And as it is a resource, then obviously, I would say naturally, we can monetize it. It's very difficult actually to say how much it costs, that one piece of data, like 1 digit size data. But I believe that in a couple of years, the world will actually be able to count this way or that way. We will be able to count how much data is worth. So it's becoming a new asset, and as it's becoming a new resource, then obviously, quite naturally, it's a target. On the other hand, I think we all know that there is no such thing as for free. So even if it's private individuals' data, it is already monetized. Many presentations today have already sort of mentioned marketing and marketing-related digital activities. All these activities monetize data. It doesn't matter whether it's private individuals' data or company data or national data, part of a national data set. From marketing perspective, from commercial perspective, the large bulk of data, large amount of data is already monetized, and it's also considered as a kind of virtual currency. So it's like exchangeable, okay? Also, from another perspective again, private individuals pay with the personal data sets for kind of free services. That was also mentioned by many presenters today, many speakers of this conference. Basically, when we receive a sort of free email for any kind of benefit, what we have to offer is our personal data, any kind of not only personal data, but some of you have already mentioned that there are some specificities that we give, like I prefer this color, that color, I'm of this age and that age. So that is also a lot of data that we usually give away. And when I say we, it's like I'm speaking in general, so that many people usually give away without actually thinking of the financial value of the data that they provide. So, if it's the case, then should it be protected, this kind of data? Then how should it be protected if yes? Or how about regulating its use if it has to be protected / if it can be monetized? And how about the overuse of it? Can we restrict it anyhow, or should we? So these were the basic questions that were one of the motivators in package for actually implying GDPR and actually starting discussing GDPR preparation issues many, many years ago. A further angle. This is my professional area, so I can talk about it for approximately a week without taking more than 3 breaths, but I'm not doing that for you today, so I'm just illustrating what we also have to take into consideration, and what was also within the motivation package for GDPR is the cyber warfare. So basically, in an ideal situation, what you don't experience is the tangible effect of a cyber war, of a cyber incident, or any kind of cyber crisis that is in between 2 nation states, let's say. But anyway, that is also a very, very important angle that I would say national security professionals and cybersecurity professionals tackle. This picture was actually taken in GlobSec, which is a large conference, usually in this time of the year. This one happened just like last week in Bratislava, and that is a global policy-making platform for security in general. And this year they had a huge conversation dedicated to cybersecurity and cyber warfare. Sorry about having the headline in Hungarian. This very article that I wanted to use for illustration is not available for English. But anyway, why I really wanted to have it as an illustration and putting an emphasis on this issue is that we still have a lack of regulation piece here, because Europe is making a lot of efforts and is doing good in actually regulating different angles and different activity areas of cybersecurity and cyber defense a little bit. But this one, the question of cyber war, still lacks a strong legislation and a strong regulation package. I have posed a couple of questions and I have raised a couple of concerns, but let's see what we have, okay? EU, the European Union, has been busy with regulating the cybersphere for a couple of years by now, many years actually. This is on this slide, you can actually see a selection of answers that the EU was meant to provide very thoughtfully, very conceptually, trying to tackle the cybersecurity questions and cyber defense questions from a strategic and conceptual point of view. First of all, I usually mention the cybersecurity strategy of the EU. The title is An Open, Safe and Secure Cyberspace. That was created and commonly accepted in 2013. So that is basically, now there is a renewal procedure ongoing, so we will have a quite new one with a lot of new questions and answers discussed in that one. But since 2013, we have an up and running cybersecurity strategy here in the EU community. The next one that we usually emphasize is the existence of the NIS directive, the Network and Information Security Directive, that was also the creation of the year of 2016, so 2 years ago. Then, obviously, we have the GDPR. So basically, the network, and let's go back to the NIS directive. The Network and Information Security Directive is an essential part of EU's answers to cybersecurity in general, because that contains a lot of regulatory angles and sort of requirements on a network level. So it basically describes how strategically how to secure networks in different types of critical infrastructure. Okay? So that is the network level security strategy, let's say. And then with the GDPR, the EU tackles the question of how to, let's say, cyber secure the question of private individuals' data. That is also very important to keep in mind that GDPR refers only to private individuals. This is why it's very important to put it into a larger picture so that you could have a better understanding of its relevance. Next one, electronic identification and trust services for electronic transactions in the internal market, so very shortly EDAS. ADAS, usually this is how we call it. It's about digitalization, documents, and so on and so forth. Not many people know about it, but this is also very fundamental when exchanging data in between nation states and different organizations, official services. Also, previously related to AXO's presentation, ADA's presentation, the Digital Single Market Strategy for Europe. Since having the digital single market strategy for Europe, we basically created the basic version of a digital safe haven. So if you add all these up, then in an ideal situation, you start seeing Europe as a kind of border-protected continent, physical and virtual continent, which aims to provide a special place with special requirements for handling technical data, critical infrastructure data, and by now, private individuals' data in a more cyber-secured way. This is where I want to lead you. So this is the area where we will arrive. And finally, the idea of contractual public-private partnership on cybersecurity, which was the basic idea for actually establishing AXO, is a sort of, cherry on top, because that is the fundament that actually links private companies, digital service providers to nation states, and through that to EU as a commercial community, and then it closes the circle. Yes? Okay, so that was a good click. The timeline, also for illustration for you to have a better understanding. Horizontally, you actually see, I believe this is the horizontal line. So the flat line, the light blue one, actually poses the timeline of working out the GDPR from a very basic data protection idea to the regulation that comes into force from today, or has to be applied from today. It was a very long process. On the vertical line, I think it's green, it should be green, from green to red, to you, that poses or sort of illustrates the way how the NIS directive was created. And so the idea, the original idea was to make these two meet and provide a technically secure and also legislatively secured basically environment for handling technical data and private individuals' data together. Because previously, I believe your last question was absolutely relevant, that how critical infrastructure service providers can be linked to GDPR. I believe this is the answer to your question, to your previous question, because from GDPR on, and when I could say, from the moment when GDPR meets NIS directive, and we have to imply these two together, then critical infrastructure service providers have no other chance than imply both of these. And so this is how private individuals' data can be more relevantly protected in the European critical infrastructure environment. So, motivations again, and I think it's very important because after this I can actually give you a little bit of illustration of how this whole thing looks like from outside. So what was the motivation again for creating GDPR and all this legislative environment? First of all, the EU's motivation is creating a digital safe haven, let's say, for Europe, and for third country digital service providers who operate within the EU environment and who work with EU private individuals' data. That means who provide services for European citizens. Why is that so? There are a lot of third country service providers, Chinese, Hong Kongese, I don't know, American, so really a lot service providers who either control or process EU citizens' data. Just think about the case when you go on holiday and you actually fly out or travel out from the EU environment. You set up your accommodation in a nice hotel somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. You enjoy your time and you come back to EU, and then you have a sort of hint or information about your personal data being compromised. I'm translating it again, reused by other people for certain purposes, okay? After GDPR, it's a kind of more difficult for falling into such a situation, ideally. Obviously, a couple of years will have to pass by because all industry service providers need time to actually learn how to implement new systems. They have to learn how to restructure their software elements to be able to comply with GDPR regulations, because it doesn't come in a fortnight, let's say. So there is still a long way to go, but from the EU perspective, this was the only way actually to force out from third country service providers to handle EU citizens, private individuals' data in a more secure way. And I'm always emphasizing it because, as I already mentioned, my company has a lot of business activities in the Far East. And there are certain areas where even the idea and the concept of privacy is not known. So if you move out from the continent to further areas of the globe, there are really, really huge areas and huge service providers who have no interest in the question of privacy. They don't understand it, they don't care about it, they have no technical measures implemented to force out privacy, they have no related cryptography implementations, they have nothing that is for the benefit of the private individuals whose data they actually process. That is one angle. On the opposite side, EU has decided, and this is one of the largest motivations again of GDPR, to actually create an added value of EU being a digital safe haven. I hope you can follow me. So basically, the idea and the motivation for creating all these legislative elements, not only GDPR, but the NIS directive and all the other legislative elements and strategies that are meant to support a cyber secure space within the EU environment are basically the fundaments of the new era coming after 2020, which will be actually, I believe that's on my next slide, yes, which will be the digital autonomy. So there are several approaches to cybersecurity all over the world. I could go into details about how it works in Russia, how it works in China, how it works in the Far East, but not in mainland China, but in the other areas further down to the south, and also how it works in the US and in the Americas. Now, I have to tell you two things. One is that so that area that puts the most emphasis on private individuals' rights and private individuals' monetized digital values is Europe. So basically, we are that environment that actually think about the protection of private individuals' data. That's one thing. How can we monetize it? We provide a digital safe haven to those commercial entities that come from this third world, let's say, but still, for certain reasons that we may not be aware of even, they think that this is an added value for them to put their businesses into. Because there are some environments, there are some digital environments that consider it as an added value. So through this, Europe is able to create an added value to its own digital economy. That's one thing. And the other thing is that through this, we are also able to at least somehow, to some extent, protect those private individuals' data that have to be handled to any reasons, basically, because of any reasons, in a third world environment. And when I say third world, I definitely not mean it negatively, it's just the geolocation from this perspective. So, through this, also, as we, obviously, many of you, I'm sure that you read newspapers and you actually understand trends of how I don't really want to touch it because it's a very political issue, but there is this migration situation that many people sort of, come up with and use politically. There are political answers to this. I'm not meant to discuss this, but in the virtual environment, what is actually happening and what will happen in the EU environment is that EU will create a digital border protection line. And GDPR is also a very important fundament on the road where EU actually reaches that kind of much more closed and much more legislatively, I'm seeking for the word, so much more strict digital environment, let's say. For this, we need also a special issue, a common legislation in a federated environment. This is what the EU also provides with the GDPR. I've been traveling all over the world and I've seen many environments. Actually, what I can tell you is that the EU is the only community that is able to provide this kind of issue. So there are no other elements, no other parts of the globe, no other geolocations that provide such a strong legislation, such a strong support for a federated digital environment. EU does it, and that is one of the most, that is also a very important motivation when it comes to implying GDPR. Obviously, there are negative things coming with GDPR as well, just like financially, severely punishing those companies that are not able to comply with it. This is a kind of thing that will clear up the GDPR, that will clear up the digital market. We will see how it goes. My personal view is that it will still take a couple of years when we reach to this point that actually we will experience these huge punishments coming. But still, and I will close my, my speech with, what the GDPR will bring around and what is absolutely unique comparing to other environments out of the EU is the implication of the security by design and privacy by design fundamentals. There are no other legislative environments and information security legislative environments that put so much emphasis, or I could say enforce so strongly, the implication of security by design and privacy by design. So in my personal view, I believe this will be one of the largest and one of the greatest added values of the time when GDPR will really become an everyday practice, and when we actually step over of the feeling that GDPR is a huge threat, and we are still trying to actually understand how we can handle the technical changes that we have to imply to be able to comply with GDPR. So that's it. I hope I could add some to the ideas that you could listen in the morning and the early afternoon session. So I'm open to questions.
Good one, Anett. Thank you very much. Now, I honestly must say it was a very vast type of the things you touched. Some of them you barely touched, and some of them you dug in deep. I still have one question for you, and that is, of course, obviously related to the digital borders, to the privacy, to some EU regulations regarding its citizens, etc. And it all connects or goes through the prism where e-identity actually is. Because I think that's one of the key factors, so that's one of the keys in securing or trying to understand which are your citizens you are protecting and which are not, and where the data starts and where the data ends, etc. And today we had also this presentation regarding the blockchain technologies in terms of encrypting that kind of personalities and so in enabling P2B services. Now, do you feel GDPR is just the beginning of, I would say, centralization of e-privacy and e-identity, or is just a commercial thing, the commercial law actually? Or it's not?
I do believe, I'm certain, I would say, I'm certain about the thing that you have just mentioned, that we are just at the beginning of centralizing the protection of e-identity in general. Because wherever you go outside the EU, these processes, like central handing of either in a negative or in a positive sense of the e-identity in general, have already been, so these measures have already been taken, and the legislative elements have already been implied. Mm-hmm. I'm not mentioning countries, but basically before the NIS directive / GDPR era, EU was just left behind. And that was obviously an internal decision, and that's also a historically politically made and based decision. But I think money makes the world go round, to be really honest. And if EU really wants to come up to the group of firsts in digital economy, we really have to approach this question. We have approached this question on EU level, and this is the outcome. And with this approach, EU is quite extraordinary. This is what I see from outside. From, for example, from the Far East perspective, EU is absolutely extraordinary. The Far East doesn't understand, for example, why we step on this DPO role. Why do we need DPOs? Why do we need CIOs? Why do we need CISOs? Why the digital, I don't know, marketing officer has to have cybersecurity skills? Because for them, what is important is the business continuity.
Yeah, okay. Okay, now, that's a good one, and I will try to touch that as well in one of the panels afterwards, where we try to, scale out the view on the implications of the GDPR on EU and competitiveness of EU companies. Obviously, we've lost that moment. We've lost that train where we could have our own LinkedIn, our own Facebook, our own Google, our own search engine, etc., etc. But at least we set up rules how these services have to be serviced, sold, and maintained in this matter here in Europe. Okay, I think this is the second one I handed to you.
Thank you.
It was so great to have you on the stage, for me personally, the second time. Thank you very much. I hope you find something good and tasty this time. And well, we meet afterwards. Thank you very much. Okay.